Welcome to Beyond Fringe, an organic podcast discussing the topics beyond the fringe of this or any other reality. On this podcast, we explore cryptids, paranormal activity, lost legends, aliens, government conspiracies, historic mysteries, lost treasures, and forbidden archaeology. I'm the Cryptid Guy, and with me as always is my co-host, Daniel Hurst, a.k.a. Tiny. Together, we explore the world beyond fringe.
Today, my friends, we decided we wanted to talk about the Dogman phenomena. Now, I myself have personally encountered one of these creatures, so I am a firm believer that it is an organic life form that is indigenous to this planet. I believe it is a descendant of what was commonly referred to as the cynocephali. Tiny, what's your thoughts on this?
Well, I'm kind of new to the Dogman specter. And I actually didn't know anything about Dogman until I met you. And
You're welcome.
Yeah. You know, my cryptid experience was, Bigfoot, of course, and, a few flying cryptids and the dinosaurs, things like that. I hadn't heard anything about Dogman. And Dogman actually, as far as his popularity is concerned, seems to be a relatively new phenomenon. And my research that I did some real quick research last night, so I can sound smart on the podcast.
I understand.
And, from what I found, the first document, now correct me if I'm wrong, but this is what I found, is the first documented Dogman encounter was in Wexford County, Michigan.
About
1887.
Yeah.
Is what I
With
found.
that little girl?
Two lumberjacks.
Yeah.
And they described him as having a massive human body and a dog's head. And, that being the first documented sighting. And that sparked the Michigan Dogman, is everything that I found.
If you listen to that song, the Dogman, it was done by a DJ. It's actually a cool song if you're into cryptid stuff. But it talks about how they show up every 7 years.
Yeah.
And it goes right into, because he starts with that. I thought you were going to talk about, there was another one in Michigan where a little girl was actually taken. And she wasn't harmed or anything, but she was taken. And David Paulides talks about this in one of his books. I can't remember which one it is. But she said that it was a big bear and it fed her berries and it ate her hat. And her dad,
to remember that.
Yeah, and her dad was he was a man of distinction in the town, and they found her and they asked her where she'd been, and she said she had been with the bear. Now that might have actually been a Bigfoot report too, but a lot of people described it as a large wolf.
Well, that brings me, actually, that story brings me to two other things that I found while I was researching. And one being that evidence. There's not a lot of evidence. There's all kinds of encounter stories. Not a lot of evidence, but with all of the encounter stories, you hear the encounters, and everybody's always terrified that they're going to get killed and eaten. But it's very unlikely for an actual attack to happen. Most people walk away from it unharmed, just scared to death.
I agree. I mean, I don't know if we've talked about this in other podcasts, but there was the time you and me and a former investigator we used to work with were pretty deep in a isolated branch of the Appalachian Forest, and I believe we were being tracked by a Dogman. I remember that. But if you also remember when that was going on, we didn't feel like we were in danger. It was more along the lines of like we were trying to get a picture, and this entity or creature just kept moving away, but then it kept following us. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So you remember? You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. So, let me ask you this then. I've heard, I think actually you have said this, that Dogman is referred to in some circles as the crypto-terrorist.
Yeah, that was actually from Dark Waters.
Okay.
That was his little, but I'm a firm believer that's an accurate description.
So, why do you think that something that seems more animalistic than, say, Sasquatch has so few actual attacks?
We probably don't taste good.
I've heard we taste like pork.
You never know. I heard chicken, but hey, who's going to know? I don't think, and I also think they're intelligent enough to know that if they keep let's just say there's a supply of decent food around. Let's just say there's a herd of deer around,
Right.
and there's a pack of dogmen. Let's just call it that. All right. Why would they naturally? Why wouldn't they go for what they naturally know is food?
It's true.
All right, unless we were a threat or something like that. I mean, there've been dogmen attacks. I've heard of dogmen stopping cars in the middle of the street, like people stopping, and them just beating the crud out of the hood and staring at them and smiling at them, just scaring the bejesus out of them. I personally think they think it's funny. I think they're intelligent enough to have a sense of humor. You know, there have been reports of hearing Bigfoot laugh. You know, like, a real good friend of mine that I'm very confident in his abilities, who grew up on a farm with a lot of boogers, told me he's heard him laugh. It sounds almost like Jabba the Hutt. Oh. You know, so and why, if they can't have a sense of humor, why couldn't dogmen? I mean, if they're the same, you know,
well, if you think about
intellect.
If you think about it, you know, you're talking about whether it's Sasquatch or Dogman, you're talking about two advanced animals. You know, if you're on that train that believes they're just simply animals and you're advanced animals. And if you think about, you know, your dog at home has a sense of humor.
I agree. My well, she's passed now, but our lab, I'm telling you, that dog used to watch TV, and she would specifically sit down and watch the Golden Girls.
Yeah.
And I think it's just because she thought it was funny. I really do.
Yeah.
So.
And, you know, mine at home, I've got 5 dogs, and each one has different personality, and one of them's just silly. You know, and if you're talking about your pet at home having that sense of humor, and I'm a firm believer that they have a full range of emotions, then why couldn't an advanced?
I agree, and I think that if they're even more advanced, they have more range.
Yeah.
And be more sensitive. I honestly think these creatures, both Bigfoot and Dogman, are highly adapted, highly intelligent, and I think they know exactly what they're doing. And I think one of the reasons why they don't attack humans, like, you know, you were talking about a minute ago, is simply because they know that will unleash hell. They also know what our fire sticks will do.
Right.
You know, and I'm a firm believer that if they can communicate with each other, well, let's just say you got a pack here in North Carolina, all right, and they migrate a little bit, and they run into a pack from Louisiana,
Right.
and they sit there, and maybe they I don't know, have a conversation. We don't know,
Right.
but they'll say, hey, listen, we lost 4 of our guys to a bunch of these hairless apes with their bang sticks. So who's to say that's not true? Or maybe it's cave drawings. We
Right.
don't know. They could communicate in that way. There's just so many ways we don't know. There's so many questions that are so unanswered on how they communicate. I'm a firm believer that they have a language and they communicate. They could be speaking to each other in the infrasound range. We'd never hear it.
Yeah.
They could. So that's why I look at that. And I think Bigfoot's the same thing. I think, you hear people talking about the samurai chatter and the Bigfoot communicating. I think they can also communicate with, high-pitched whistles that we probably can't hear. I think Bigfoot I think he's definitely got infrasound, and I think Dogman probably has the same thing too.
Well, if the Aborigines, if they can communicate with clicks and pops and things like that, then why couldn't Bigfoot?
Exactly. I mean, it could be the most ancient of all languages.
Yeah.
I mean, it really could be.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it is what it is. But I'm a firm believer that they do communicate, and I think that it shows through the history of the Cynocephali and the Dogman, even through the recorded, I guess we'd call it transactions throughout American history. So I know you have another one. Let's go ahead and talk about that one.
Yeah, I actually have several here.
Oh, good.
And actually that was a good segue into it. You're talking about, a pack, I guess you would say, from North Carolina communicating with a pack from, say, Georgia. So,
I mean, to my mind, why wouldn't they?
Yeah.
I don't think it's always going to be a territorial dispute or a food dispute. Eventually, they're going to want, if you've got like X amount in this pack and X amount in that pack, and they're intelligent enough, they're probably not going to want to interbreed with their own, pack. So, they're going to need new fresh blood. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
That's how I think of it.
It does to me. Well, I was reading in that case that there's different types of dogman.
Mm-hmm.
And the most typical reported is what I read as the canine type. And it being called the canine type is because mostly the types of legs that it has. And instead of having knees and ankles, it has hocks and stifle joints.
Right.
Like a dog.
Yeah, and it uses a digigrade footprint.
and a lot of them have been reported having disproportionately large heads. Some more hyena looking, and I've heard a lot of people say it looked like the werewolf from Van Helsing.
That I have gotten that. That is the best comparison I've ever got. I've got a picture. I don't have it with me. It's actually one of the ones hanging in my office. But it was actually a depiction. I was either from Tennessee. It was a guy from Tennessee that ran into one not too far from this area. It's actually included in my cryptid triangle. But that's exactly. He was an artist, and he drew it, and it looks. I mean, it's massive. It's terrifying. Yeah. The type you're describing, that's what I call the Charlie type.
Yeah.
And that's the smaller type, and we get a lot of reports around those. I get a lot more of those in the south. The reports I get up here, like in our area generally, are the alpha and the beta types. The alpha type is just that massive. It's still got the hawks, but it's just massive. It's up to 12 feet tall. Some of them have been reported. It's just massive. It looks like the Incredible Hulk with hair covered on it. I mean, it's got this massive head on it. And the beta type is a smaller version of that. What you're describing, like again, this is just my classification. Right. And what you're describing is a Charlie type. Now, a lot of people think that there's Dogmen, and this is just my opinion, but there's a lot of people think that there's Dogmen that have just regular human attributes as far as they walk in a pedological.
What I was reading is they call.
I don't think that's Well, I don't call that classification. I've thought about this a lot, and I've talked to a lot of people. I personally think that's a Genasqua, and we can talk about that on another podcast. But that's a whole different animal. And that's what I think it is, because a Genasqua has that extended, elongated muzzle, much like what they think a canid Bigfoot type is. I just don't think that true Dogman, Xenocephalide descendants, have that kind of body mechanics. I think they still have the hawks, and I still think they have, the digigrade footprints.
And most reports that I've heard talk about, 7 to 8 feet tall. I got to thinking about that. My neighbor had 2 Great Danes, and big dogs, tall dogs,
real big dogs.
And like I say, I'm 6.5 feet tall, and one of his dogs stood up and put his paws on my shoulders and hugged me, and his head was level with my head. And I got to thinking about that. 7, 8 feet tall.
It's massive.
It's massive, but it's really not that hard to think about.
No, and if you think about, again, I always throw this back. We talked a lot about our last podcast. We talked about nature and how nature gives attributes to certain elements and creatures. Why wouldn't they be massive?
Yeah,
they would need to be to hunt, to escape, to run. They'd have to be. I mean, look at Kodiak bears. They're not small.
No.
Polar bears. That is not a small bear.
Yeah.
And what we have up here in North Carolina, those are tiny little, and I've probably got a 300-400 pound bear in my neighborhood. Gets my trash cans all the time. I call him Orson. He's an SOB. Every morning, he'll knock over every trash can and leave it alone. And then he comes to mine and he just rips everything. It's a pain in the neck. But anyway, I mean, that's not a very big bear. Is it bigger than me? Oh, yeah. But in the broad spectrum of things, it's not that big. And let's look at, if we look at the historical outline of, the way nature kind of handled things, 10, 12,000 years ago, everything was a lot bigger. Look at saber-toothed tigers, you had short-faced bears, you had, land sloth. I mean, you had all these massive creatures that were walking around. So if anything, what we've done is actually shrink.
Yeah.
So, I mean, look at direwolves,
Yeah.
I mean, what's to say that the direwolves didn't evolve into the Xenocephali? We don't know. We don't know. We know that evolution happens, so why wouldn't this? It's just been going over for millions of years and we never noticed it. Or that's where the folklore from, monsters came from.
Right.
And you were just taught to avoid it, like the big bad wolf. Is there any scenario, there's always a big bad wolf.
Yeah.
And
hellhounds.
Hellhounds, exactly. Why couldn't that be a Xenocephali or a Dogman? We don't know. It's.
So you said Xenocephali several times. Explain what that is.
Xenocephali, the best example, and like I said, we talked about this on our last podcast, the best example would be like Anubis in Egyptian mythology, had a man's body with a dog's head. And, even if you go into folklore or even ancient history, Alexander the Great allegedly hired a band of Xenocephali to be mercenaries. And they had their own language. They when they were camping, they'd be with themselves. They were considered just terrifying. They had unbelievable swordsmanship skills, and they were very, very cunning workers in metal, believe it or not. But they had their own language. They ate their meat raw, and they were just horrifying. He was like their special forces unit. He sent them in to take care of all the problems. So, and that's an ancient, history. So, what's to say it's not true? The Greeks have myths about Dogman. The Romans, of course. Mm-hmm. It's all throughout history.
Well, our first popularly documented case was, what did I say, 1877?
Something like
1878.
That, yeah.
But the lore on Dogman goes back.
Well, look at how long the werewolf lore goes around.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what it really is.
And there's been Dogman encounters on every continent except, Antarctica?
And who's really down there?
Right.
That's the other thing. And if there's that vast tunnel system that everyone thinks, or Hollow Earth or whatever, you never know.
Yeah.
If you like the new Godzilla movies, everything's got tunnels going to it. So,
yeah.
You never know.
Now, I was also reading, you think about these encounters, whether it's Dogman, Bigfoot, Ghost, or anything like that, any monster type encounter you have, you think about it as always happening at night, but that's not necessarily the case.
No, because the Dogman incident the sighting I had happened right in like 11 a.m., right around there. So I think these things are out all the time. I just think the problem is it's so well camouflaged. They're not going to be seen unless they want to be seen, one. And two, if you do see them and they're not really expecting it, depending on the situation, like if they're in their natural environment, they don't care. Because they know they can step off into the woods and disappear in 2 seconds. They just don't care. So again, I think, and I think that shows intelligence.
Right.
I think a lot of these sightings are situational, though. I think if you're in downtown Asheville, you're probably not going to see a Dogman.
Right.
There could be one climbing around, we wouldn't see it, but you never know.
Scarier things in downtown Asheville than Dogman.
Well, these days, yes, I agree.
Oh. So we're full, by the way, y'all. Don't move here.
Yeah. Traffic's not that good. Parking's terrible.
So
barbecue's great.
Depending on where you go.
True.
Depending on where you go. So in my research, one of the things that I was trying to find was some evidence. You can find all kinds of Bigfoot evidence, whether it's hoaxed or blah, blah, blah. But you couldn't find a lot of Dogman evidence. And some of it was clearly hoaxed. But I picked out a couple of things, actually from a very short documentary about the Michigan Dogman. It was made in 2008. That kind of piqued my interest. I was wondering if you had seen any of them.
Which one was it? I've seen a lot of them.
Yeah, I'm sure.
I love watching them.
One was the McHale photo taken in '68.
Is that the one by the
it's
traffic pole?
No, it's just in a field.
Okay.
And what the story behind it, and the reason I like that one in particular is it's so old. For one, people, back then really aren't thinking about hoaxing, but with the film that it's on, you're going to have a hell of a time doing anything with the film.
Yeah, that's old 35 millimeter film.
Right. So, and the story behind that was a lady and her husband was out, and she was just taking pictures of the scenery, saw some deer, heard a deer come out of the woods, and was getting ready to take a picture, and her eye caught movement, and she looked back, and it was this big wolf that came out like it was pacing the deer, and then stood up and stood there and watched the deer like it was trying to decide if it had a good chance of getting a hold of any of them. And she took it's a really good picture of it. Shows its ears, it looks...
I've probably seen it, and I just can't remember the name.
And I'll put all this at the end of the podcast.
Cool.
For everybody to look at and make their own decisions. But that one intrigued me. One, like I say, because of the age, and two, because, honestly, the clarity of the photo.
It was called the McHale?
McHale. And it was actually a Polaroid. And, you're just... With digital imagery, you can do all sorts of things with them. I can put ghosts in any picture I take, And another one was, I know you know this one. This one's real popular. Is Beast of Seven Shoots.
Oh, yeah. Can't go wrong with that. Again, I don't think that's a Dogman.
What do you think it is?
I think that's a Genasqua.
Okay.
I don't think it's, again, I'm just a firm believer that true dog, in my opinion, again, this is just my opinion, so I don't want a bunch of emails telling me that I'm crazy or I don't know what I'm talking about. This is just my opinion. I think that's a Genasqua, because it's basically a Bigfoot with an extended, muzzle,
Right.
and I think that's a Genasqua.
It was an interesting picture.
Now
It was carrying something.
Yeah, well, apparently now I got a story again. I had a friend of mine that was friends with the ranger that is actually working on that park the day that was taken, and they said a white poodle, a big full-size poodle, had gone missing about 10 minutes before that picture was recorded taken. So if you look at that white bundle, that's a full-size white poodle.
So the question is, was it food or girlfriend?
It was food, because it killed it. I mean, apparently, from what they understand, that there was a witness that heard the dog just yelp, and then it was over. So we think, I personally think, from talking to the people I've spoken to, that it was lunch.
Right. And have you heard of the Chelsea track?
Yes.
It's the only Dogman track that I ran across, and it's just so perfectly clear. And again, it was taken on 35 millimeter film.
Mm-hmm.
It was a 7-inch track, and they estimated the animal would be about 250 pounds.
Right. And I agree with that. But if you look back at even our own research, there's a picture we took where there's a digigrade track. And we put your shoe next to it. What's that? You have a 15 and a half inch boot, and that was a pretty good sized track. I mean, it had to have been 8 inches across.
Yeah.
So I mean, again, these tracks are out there. It's just I think people try to confuse them with bear tracks, or they'll discredit them as something else.
Yeah.
The other thing is, I think, dogs. I mean, look at the way dogs run. Look at the way canids run. They don't really leave huge tracks unless it's like snow or mud, something like that. So if you've got dry ground, you might see like a dig-in pattern if it's heavy enough or if it's moving fast enough. But I think for the most part, if they walk and they're just walking, they probably don't leave a whole lot of tracks. Again, I just think the way that's their built dynamics, or body dynamics work.
You're talking about a 7-inch track, right? People really aren't going to pay that much attention to it because it's only 7 inches. It's not like a dog track, 28-inch foot.
Right, and when you see a Bigfoot track, you're like, ooh, look at that. Yeah. When you see just a bear, you're thinking it's either big dog. Because no one really realizes these creatures are out there. That's the other thing. They have anonymity.
Yeah.
They're not well known.
Yeah.
No one thinks a werewolf's going to be running around in the middle of the day in a national forest.
Yeah.
So they're not really looking for it. And the truth of the matter is, if they knew these creatures were real, or if they believed they were real, they'd probably be doing a whole lot of different stuff. But it's the world we live in.
That's true. No. Another actual film that I saw was the Gable film.
The Gable film, it's a hoax.
Is it?
It's a total hoax. The guy that did the Gable film sent that into a DJ. He had all this stuff from the 70s. They went to his house. They had the truck. They had everything. He showed them exactly what they did. There's actually a second Gable film, too.
Really?
And the guy made it. The guy is incredible. I mean, he should be in Hollywood. I'm not sure what he does, but it's a complete hoax. And it's actually him in a ghillie suit doing that.
Really?
And it's his dog's mouth.
Oh, wow.
And that last part. So that's a hoax. I thought that was real.
Yeah, it really.
Yeah, he did such a good job on that. When I first saw that, I was like, "Whoa!" Because it just looked so old. Because I remember that's when I was a little kid. I remember stuff like that. And I remember the snowmobiles and stuff. He had all that stuff in his front yard, and it's just he was like a collector of that. But no, that was proven as a hoax. But I tell you what, there's a big faction of people that still are firm believers that it's real, and he only came out saying it was a hoax because he got a visit from our friends, them,
they,
them, MIBs, thems. But,
do you think it's a possibility?
Anything's possible, Tony. I believe that.
The conspiracy theorists, didn't you?
Oh, I could definitely see that happening.
Because, it was definitely intriguing.
The only thing I have to say is if it was real, then he had kept all of the equipment, like the snowmobiles, the trucks, and everything, pristine for years. So it had to have been in a barn. Like, it could have been his grandfather's. You get people live on the same family plot of land. I look at it that way, too. Because where I'm from in New England, you got families that have lived on the same tract of land for 100 years. Yeah. So if they just run out of space, they build another barn and stick stuff in that.
So is that film kind of like the Patty film, where everybody wants to fight about it?
No, I don't think it's that big of a deal. I think Patty's 100% real. I
agree.
I don't find any evidence that Patty's faked. The one guy I thought maybe did it, that guy Hieronymus, he was just too short.
Right.
He did walk like that, though. I mean, that was kind of his thing. But no, I believe the Patty film's real. And you know what? Let's say possibly on the Gable film. You never know.
It was intriguing. Like I say, y'all.
He did a great job with that.
Yeah. If it's a hoax, it's a good hoax.
It's one of the best.
And I'm not here to say one way or the other, but I'll post all this stuff with the podcast. You decide for yourself. I'm not here to slay your mind. We're putting this out there, and you make your own decision.
We're just giving you information, my friends.
Yeah.
That's all we're doing.
This is our opinions, our experiences. That's all.
That's all it is. When we're not, and I don't want to be one of these guys that sits there and bashes anyone, because you never know. Are there hoaxers? Of course there's hoaxers. But that's not for us to pick out and tell you who's a hoaxer. You should make up your own mind about everything. We're just supplying you information, and we're two guys that, we're friends. We have a lot of stuff in common, and cryptids and paranormal activity just happens to be one of them. So that's what we do. We just give you the information.
So what about stuff here in North Carolina?
Well, I'm glad you asked me about that, because I've been studying a lot of patterns over the years in this area.
There's patterns?
There's always patterns. There's patterns in everything. And, that's a big thing. Like, paranormally, you're one of the best paranormal investigators I've ever worked with. And I think, you're welcome. It's true. And I honestly believe you're gifted. I think you're gifted from God with your ability to do what you do. And that's a whole different podcast. That's we could fill a year of podcasts of what Tiny can do. But I think you'll agree that there's always patterns. And here's my example. If you're investigating a property and they say, okay, we see this ghost every couple days. Okay, every couple days, that's a pattern.
Right.
Where can you trace that back from? Why is that happening?
Right.
Okay, well, then you find out there's an old family graveyard that, has just been completely smashed up and destroyed, and there's no respect, and they've been building over it, and they didn't do anything to remove the bodies, and they didn't have it done properly. Okay, to me, that's a pattern that leads to a cause. Does that make sense? Now you have a pattern and causality. That's what I'm talking about. All right, and I've come up with a theory I like to call the Western North Carolina Cryptid Triangle, and I've taken most of my reports on a specific cryptid. Let's just call it Dogman. Let's just say Dogman. All right, and I've got that on a map, and I call that my A access point. And then I have Bigfoot. And let's just say other cryptids, unknowns, and then paranormals. And what I've done is I put that as an X, Y, and Z axis. Mm-hmm. Well, when you basically grab a ruler and put some lines to it, it's a massive triangle. And in this entire triangle, I believe, is just part of an area that has a cave system. And that's where I come up with the cryptid cave system theory that I have. I think a lot of the reasons why we're not having mass sightings of all these cryptids I think a lot of these cryptids travel subterraneously through caves. I think there's massive cave systems. I think there's many people that know all about it. I know in Kentucky there's been a group out there that's been talking about cave systems and goblins forever. And I believe that a big part of our cryptid activity is because there's tunnel systems.
Well, let me ask you this. And we've talked about your migration theory before. And with cryptids traveling, and I guess this would probably lay more with Sasquatch and Dogman than it would any of the other cryptids.
Yeah.
But do you think they would follow like possible ley lines or anything like that? Because we know that some birds, things like that.
Well, funny you mention that, because if you were to look at the x-axis, the x to a axis on my map that I've drawn, that goes right through a ley line. And that is one of the hottest areas we have. And here's the map. I'll show you. I mean, we've got no secrets from what we do decrypted, but
right.
That's what I'm talking about right there. And those are some of our hot spots,
right,
where we get constant year-round reports.
Yeah.
So that's where this whole idea, I think there's a triangle. Like I said, I call it the cryptid triangle. But I also think within that triangle, there's a huge cave system that the cryptids use to travel. And I think it's been there for millennia. I mean, it's just been there. I think they all know about it. I think, let's face it, most reports of Bigfoot, they all think he's got nocturnal vision. I believe that. Well, why wouldn't a dog have nocturnal vision?
It would make sense for any apex predator to
have nocturnal vision because most things feed at night. So a tunnel's not going to bother them.
Yeah.
And they've got that sense of smell. So even if they can't, they can get around with their sense of smell. We're, human beings, we're so arrogant to think that the only way to get around is the way we get around.
Yeah, we're very limited.
So we're exceptionally limited. These guys can go tree to tree. They don't need to even touch the ground.
Yeah.
We can't. I might get one tree and then probably gravity will take a fold. But
well, I've heard reports of Dogman on people's roofs, stuff like that.
There's a lot of reports, and you know what? Most reports of them doing, what they're doing on the roofs? They're using it as a bathroom. I got a report once from in Tennessee, not far from here, around your neck of the woods, actually, where this guy was. He inherited some property. He gets there. The place had been. He said there was claw marks all over the bottom part of the house. Looks like he thought there was bear issues. All right. So he's got these construction workers coming up. They're putting new siding on, and they say, "Hey, man, I don't know what's been on your roof, but the acidity of what's left has pretty much destroyed it. And you need to replace it." He goes up there, and there's just piles of excrement all over the place.
Dogman poo.
Dogman has poo. And not only that, he was basically using the fireplace as what one could call a toilet. The fire, the chimney.
Right.
So he had this big open chimney. Apparently, that's just what the report was. I believe him because he spent like $150,000 having to have all this damage fixed.
Well, and you've got to take into consideration too, and a lot of stories and accounts that you hear. Why would you lie about something like that?
No, you can't, because he's got pictures. He's got pictures of the roof.
So
there's just piles of dung.
So you want to venture a guess as to why?
I think it's like I think it's a territory thing. I think they're saying, hey, this is what we think of you.
Right.
This is ours, and here's what we're going to treat it as.
Maybe it's being vindictive.
A lot of vindictive. Again, I am a firm believer that both Dogman and Bigfoot are vindictive. If you wrong them. There's a big Bigfoot story in Oklahoma about a family that was plagued, and you only get a little part of the story because the whole story puts it in big perspective. Apparently, they were out hunting and they opened fire and kill a Bigfoot,
right?
And that's why they encountered all these problems. Now, when you hear the story, you never hear that part,
right?
So there's that causality, and then you have the repercussions.
Right.
Why did this happen? Again, pattern. There's a pattern right there. And that's what I'm a big fan of, is patterns, because the patterns will explain things.
And it makes sense. I mean, if you think about it, these creatures they're intelligent. They're obviously
very intelligent.
And if they have intelligence, then it's a fair assessment to think that they have emotions. And they're going to think a little bit like we do. And, you hurt my family, what am I going to do?
Exactly. Well, there's reports. There's a podcast I used to listen to. I honestly, I haven't listened to it in a long time, but there was a police officer or a park ranger that ended up somehow they were on a helicopter, and they ended up having to kill a troop of Bigfoot.
Right.
Well, they basically killed the little ones, and the mother goes to pick her up, and he said he saw her crying. And there was another there was another report from that general area too, not too long after that, I guess this guy said he was ex-special forces, sniper, and he was ordered to kill 5 or 6 of them, and he said through the scope he could see the mother crying. So, I mean, who says they don't have emotions? Again, these are all just reports, it's all hearsay, I wasn't there, I don't know. I don't even know how accurate the stories were, I didn't vet anyone, so... The guy could have been making up, but to me it makes sense because that would explain why you've got repercussions.
Yeah.
If you kill a deer in the woods in hunting season, you don't have to worry about the rest of the pack coming after you with a vendetta.
Right.
When you do something to a Bigfoot or Dogman, you should worry about a vendetta. I mean, there's been reports. I've heard a story personally, and I'm not sure. This is one of those ones in my iffy file. The guy takes a shot at a Bigfoot. Because my honest belief is he said it was for self-defense, but I think he was just trying to become an instant millionaire.
Yeah,
that's my honest plan. After talking to him,
happened.
Yeah, because he really had from the story he had no. I mean, he was like 120 yards away from this thing. He just could have gotten in his car and left.
Yeah.
Is what he should have done. But he took a pop shot at this thing. Now, he lived 15 miles from this place where he was. The next morning, he wakes up, and his truck was destroyed. There was a big, someone expressed themselves on his front desk or his front porch in a big pile and had urinated all over his door.
Well.
And, what else can do that? I mean, honestly, it destroyed. He said that it was crunched in. There was a tree branch through his windows, and it tipped it on its side. You take one of these things off. I'm a firm believer. They might have their brother in their hunting area might know exactly where you live. They see that truck, think, I know where this guy lives.
Yeah.
It's one of those
well,
things.
It would make sense too to think, since they're an apex predator, they could probably follow a scent trail.
Oh, definitely. And then we know they can run at least 50 miles an hour when they really push it. And let's face it, in a dirt road in the mountains, you're not going to be driving, bootlegger speed.
Yeah.
In a $40,000 truck.
15 miles, that's nothing to something that's,
nothing.
10, 12 feet tall.
Exactly. Because we have to look at dynamics differently. I asked a friend of mine that, he's been dealing with boogers his whole life. I said, how far were they traveling at night to hunt? And he goes, I think they'll do about a 100-mile circle. He goes, I think they can, because they can cover it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and you figure, they don't have to worry about the underbrush or anything. I mean, they just walk through.
And what if they run into a bear? They're gonna, what's the bear gonna do? It's gonna run
Smack
away.
him.
He's gonna pick it up and throw it like a cat. Move.
Yeah.
Big man coming through. So that's the way I look at
it.
And
I think we should backtrack just a second and talk about the map that you showed me. Now, I'm not going to post that online because we don't want the responsibility of somebody going, ooh, I want to go hunting and disappear.
That's why, we've learned, we used to tell people everything. I used to do these symposiums at REI, and I still do. I love doing it. It's one of the high points. Every 6 months I do it, and I just love it because I get to meet new people, and REI has just been so good to us, and they're a great organization, and I'm not getting anything for that. They just allow me to use their space, and because we do everything outdoor related, that's why I say that. But they've always been really good and let me do pretty much whatever I want when I do one of those symposiums. But I used to show maps. This is where I do. This is where we saw this. And that's great. But then one day I realized, wait a minute, people might go out there. And then I started thinking to myself, I don't want anyone to get hurt.
Yeah.
And that's where I kind of changed over. So I'm very honest about everything we find. And like if we get pictures, we post everything. We show you all the information we get. We just don't tell you where we get it because we don't want anyone getting hurt. That's the bottom line. It's number one rule is safety. No matter what, it's always about safety. And when you decide you want to go do some cryptid investigation, even paranormally.
Yeah.
Everyone wants to go into the old busted up house or the old prison that's no longer being used. Those places are dangerous, my friend, because you're going to go in at night. That's just the way it's going to be.
Yeah.
2, you don't know the area. 3, you don't know how secure the flooring is. There's just all these dangers.
4, there's other people.
There's always other people. And let me tell you something. You don't know what kind of person you're going to run into because there's always someone trying to do something that it may not be what we would call, I don't know, Tiny. How should I say this without being too un-PC here? There's always someone's always up to some shenanigans. We'll leave it at that. And you don't want to run into them because you never know what they're willing to do. See, it always depends on who's willing to do what. If you're willing to go out there and get information and investigate, that's one thing. But if you run into a group of people that are willing to do more than that, to keep what they're doing a secret, then you've got a problem. Does that make sense?
And even us, as an example, we make the decision to go out here in the woods and, even taking Bigfoot and Dogman out of the equation, there's things out there that can hurt you.
Oh, definitely.
I mean, there's, hikers get hurt all the time. That's us making that decision for us. We don't want to give anybody else any ideas and get them hurt. But even us, we've ran into people, one instance that I can think of.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
And had we not been armed, we might have been hurting.
Let me tell you something. I think that guy was looking, I think he was doing something out there. He knew. And the second I kind of stood up and.
Yeah. That shovel was definitely in an aggressive stance.
Yeah, oh yeah. And the only reason, we ran into 2 individuals that One of them had a shovel, and the other one probably had. To me, it looked like almost a bat or something. I'm not, or like a handle. What it looked like.
Focused on the shovel.
It looked like more like an axe handle, and they just cornered us. Now, Tiny's not a small guy, and he's lost a lot of weight, but Tiny's a big dude. He could be a pro wrestler if he wanted to be. I mean, he's got that kind of size. He's not just tall; he's wide. And I'm no schmuck. I'm 6 foot, and at that time I was 240.
Yeah.
And I got a little bit of a beer gut, but not. I'm still pretty solid. And these guys were both, they weren't small, but they weren't huge either.
Yeah.
But they were very aggressive, and it stopped the second I stood up and kind of showed them I had a 357 on my hip. And then I look at Tiny, and then Tiny's got a gun, and they're like, oh. And then the whole thing changed. We weren't being aggressive. We didn't pull a weapon. We didn't even point to it. It's just we just stood up completely because at that point we were taking pictures in a trail where we found footprints. So they just came up on us like they were. I honestly thought they were thinking about just jumping us. That's kind of what I got out of it. And then when we stood up and they saw we were armed, the whole situation changed. It went from screw you to yes sir in 2 seconds.
And you've got to think too that back in these backwoods, you've still got shiners.
Oh, that's what I think we ran into.
You've got people that grow pot,
mm-hmm.
they.
And we're not going to mess. I got news and just for anyone that listens, we're not rats. You do what you do. We do what we do. We don't care. This is America. You do whatever you want to do. Neither one of us is going out there snitching, seeing anything because sometimes we might accidentally trespass. Or, take pictures in areas where people don't want things taken. Not anything other than nature pictures.
We don't do it maliciously.
It's not done maliciously, but it happens. Like, it's hard sometimes. You're in a national forest, who lives on this property. And you're walking. You don't know who's over here. I mean, you might have crossed someone's boundaries. So, and all we do, we just leave footprints. We don't leave any glitter. We don't damage anything. We don't start fire. We're just very, very, very polite about what we do and where we do it. We don't want any problems. And we don't give anyone any problems either. It's a live and let live thing with me. I'm not going to give anyone a problem unless they're making me have a problem. And Tiny's the same way.
To sum all of that conversation up, it's two things that we want to say. One is be careful.
Always be
careful.
Because
it's dangerous. And two, don't go where we go, unless you're prepared. And we'll probably do a podcast.
I think we should because realistically, there's, it's not, we just don't park the cars and start walking. We do research. We've got equipment. We've got survival equipment. We've been trained. We've got years and years of experience doing this. I mean, Tiny doesn't even need to wear shoes when he's out in the woods. In fact, he's only happy if he's barefoot walking out in the woods, and he's just, again, he's just hillbilly born. There,
that's a Tennessee boy.
That's the way to do it. So I mean, he knows what he's doing. I've been in the woods my whole life, northern Appalachia. So but we always learn stuff too. We're always taking steps to improve ourselves, and we'll buy better equipment, and we get trained a lot. We get through a lot of training, and that's just the way we do it. So we don't go out there unprepared. As a matter of fact, this year we're both going to have emergency GPS locators. We've been thinking about that for a while, and we're both doing it. And that's just another thing. Hopefully we'll never have to use it, but that's just another thing we'll have. Right. So you have to be prepared. I think we'll do, maybe in a podcast or two we'll go over what you need. I mean, what not to wear, what to bring. Because there's a whole bunch of stuff you need, and then there's a whole bunch of stuff you don't need. And realistically, with the technology today, you don't need a whole lot of camera equipment. I mean, pretty much a cell phone's all you need. I've got, my wife bought me this real cool waterproof, shockproof Nikon that, I bring that, and that's kind of a backup because that does video too and all that other stuff. But people going out there with all these camera equipment and stands and all this stuff, it's kind of tripods, things like that. You don't need them. You really don't. I mean, if you got to take a picture and take
those are serious photography.
Yeah, but, we went out one time with someone, it's like they had 3 bags of equipment. And I'm like, what is that? And he goes, this is photo equipment. And I'm like, what? I said, we're tracking 9 miles into the woods today. You're not going to, and he made it, a mile?
That's serious photographer.
Yeah, it's just too much. It's too much.
Yeah, when you're out hunting cryptids, I mean, you want to take it simple.
Yeah, you want to be prepared. I think you need to be more prepared for like having an emergency and having to stay out in the woods at night. So you need to have food, water, things to make fire, survival blankets. I got an emergency pup tent. I mean, we have all that stuff, and we always carry it with us, and it's in a backpack. And we know it's there. And the other thing is you have to prepare. You have to know where things are. matches, or they're waterproof. You have to have backups and redundancies. I have 3 compasses on me at all times. The other thing is you need to know how to use a compass. A lot of people go out there, okay, we're heading north. Well, just because you head north doesn't mean that direction's going to change. You have to know declination. You know how to read a map. You have to understand topography maps. So there's a whole lot of it that's basically you need to go to school first. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
you really do. And it's things we've picked up over the years. Yeah. But it's not like just grabbing a compass, your Swiss Army knife, and a camera, and you're good to go. That's not how it works, because that's how you get lost.
Yeah, exactly. So, back to Dogman.
Exactly.
You mentioned earlier that you had an experience of your own. Do you care to relate that?
I'll give a quick summary. I was driving in the northern part of the Appalachian Trail. Not the Appalachian Trail, the Blue Ridge Parkway. Actually, where I was, they were kind of right next to each other. But it was around 11:30 in the afternoon, and my wife and I, we got lost. We just got completely turned around and lost. Our Garmin wasn't working. There was no signal. The phones weren't working. Even where we were at this point, the radio signal wasn't even getting there. And we were in my wife's car. I was just driving. My wife fell asleep in the passenger side. And I was just driving. I was doing about 25, 30 miles an hour. I looked down. I was over this embankment, and I looked down. Sitting on this boulder is just massive. What I thought was a bear at first, but I couldn't believe how huge it was. And I looked down, and it was this massive alpha-type Dogman, jet black. I'll never forget it. It had jet black, and it had like these greenish yellow eyes. I locked eyes with it. I was driving by, it locked eyes with me, and it tilted its head, and a bumblebee or a butterfly flew by, and it turned its head, and it was looking at that, and it reminded me of like a massive puppy, just the way he was looking at it. Just his head kept turning, and he had his arms sitting down in front of him, and it was just huge. And I almost drove off the road. Right down, I almost drove off the road. And I just kept driving away. And he could have cared less. I was there. But I think that's another incident where he felt absolutely no threat from me. Because, this thing could have ripped that Honda apart. We never would have been found.
Yeah.
Ever.
So, when you talk about, say somebody comes to you and says, I think I have a Bigfoot on my property. Mm-hmm. There's certain kind of signs and symptoms that you look at. Does Dogman have those signs and symptoms?
Well, yes, to an extent. But the other thing is you're dealing with a creature that's, in my opinion, they're a lot more mobile. Right. And I believe they have like a base of operations. I think they've got I think they live underground. There's been stories of people finding Dogman, I guess dens was what you'd call them. But I think they do that. But I think they go out of their way to keep their hunting grounds away from their den. I think their den is kind of like their holy ground. They don't want anyone over there. So I think they travel a lot more. Plus, they're designed for it. They're built for speed. They're built for moving. That's just what they do. But I think if you have a Dogman, I think some of the things you could look at, if you've aggravated one or tried doing something or taken a shot at one, a lot of people, I've had a report. I went to go investigate this place, and this guy was a retired engineer, nice guy. And he had taken, I've told you this 1 million times, but he'd taken railroad tracks, not the wood, the steel railroad tracks, and he made him an entrance to his gate. And it was really cool looking. And yeah, he had welded. It was really
serious gate.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it was just cool looking. It was more.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not sure what those things weigh, but he woke up and his wife. They lived in the city most of their lives, so they had no inclination about farming or anything like that. But his wife wanted to have those pygmy goats. Is that what you have?
Yeah.
Is that the goat? Yeah.
No, I had full-size goat.
Oh, you got full-size? Yeah. All right. Well, these little pygmy goats, and then they had some chickens, and they had some guinea hens, and basically they just let them run around.
Right.
They had like a little barn for all of them, and they were all fenced in. It was really done, it was very nice, it was all fenced in. Well, there was this one part by the chickens where the chicken wire, and it was done with 2x4s, like pressed the pressure treated 2x4s.
Yeah.
And it looked very nice. It was, this guy had no problem spending top dollar and getting, what he wanted. But it looked like something had just stuck its hands there, ripped through the chicken wire, and gone under. But the problem was the chicken wire. What was it? 3 feet chicken wire usually fence.
Yeah,
it's about 3 feet. It ripped that. But it had bumped its head, left some hair, and the only print was like that was even visible halfway because the ground was pretty dry, was I was estimating about an 8-inch dog print. That's what it looked like because you could see claws going in the ground.
Right.
But that was all. That was it. And he told me he had seen years and years and years later, or years and years prior, when he was up in the Adirondacks, he had seen a Bigfoot. And he thought that's what it was, and that's why he called me, because when you Google Bigfoot in Nashville, boom,
Right.
Nashville Cryptid and Paranormal pops. So that's why he called me. He really didn't want me doing a whole lot of research. He just said, how do I get rid of them? And I said, well, truth be told, you need more lighting, and this is just my opinion. He said, you need more lighting. I would cut back another 20 feet on the brush, because his house was huge, but what he had done is he had a bunch of brush still before the tree line.
Yeah.
And he just left it there because he liked it. I said I would clear the brush out and just leave the tree line and just light this up, make it look like,
So you basically,
Yankee Stadium.
You basically make it an unfavorable hunt.
Right. Because and he goes, I'll tell you, I even said this, I said, if you can afford it, I said I would put outside cameras out.
Yeah.
Because they know what those are. I'm a firm believer they can hear and see those.
Well,
I think the infrared spectrum is what it is.
Yeah, see the hour light.
Right, and that's what. And then that was the last time I ever heard from him. I think he did exactly what I told him to do. And the reason why I mentioned that and to go into all this is because that's an example of someone not knowing what they had. He automatically thought it was Bigfoot. I didn't mention what I thought it was.
Right.
Because I really didn't have any proof. I just saw the track, and it was half a track to begin with, and dry. You know how dry and dusty North Carolina ground can get. And again, so that obviously fixed the problem. But I do know he told me the last time I talked to him that they had just gotten a bid to clear away the brush, and I'm sure he went and did it.
Yeah.
But that's a prime example of a lot of people think that Bigfoot activity is just Bigfoot activity, and sometimes it's something else. And that's my personal opinion. I think it was Dogman.
Right.
Because the area, that's the other thing. I know that's a hot spot for Dogman, because of where it is and what it's adjacent to.
How many reports a year do you think there are, or how many experiences, however you want to phrase that, here in North Carolina?
I'd probably say 200. I don't know how many get reported.
Yeah.
Probably
a lot don't get reported.
I think a lot more don't get reported. And I think when there is an investigation or something does happen, it's covered.
Right.
Prime example. Talk about segues. We have the Asheville Cryptid and Paranormal Society, LLC. We're very blessed enough to have a lot of good friends all over North Carolina. Just because we call ourselves Asheville Cryptid and Paranormal doesn't mean we're not global. Actually, we're actually going to be extending our reach, if you will, later this year in 2020, and we're going to open up another branch. And I think what we're going to end up calling it is the American Cryptid and Paranormal Society. But it's just an idea I've had. We've been thinking about doing that for a while. But that'll kind of give people the idea that we'll go anywhere, which is what we do now. I mean, Tiny goes into Mississippi a couple times a year to investigate. I do Tennessee, Florida, up the northeastern seacoast. So we're kind of everywhere. It's just
I'll go anywhere I can.
Well, we'll go. That's exactly. And if it's a good enough hotspot, we'll be there. And we've been lucky enough to have friends in some of these places send us information. So last year, not even a year ago, this woman, and that's all I'm going to say. This woman was walking her dogs early in the morning. Now, the reports had been coming in for weeks about someone seeing a big werewolf running around the neighborhood. Keep in mind, this neighborhood is adjacent to a national park system. And these reports have been coming in and people have been seeing stuff. Well, now, I don't know if this is what happened, but apparently this woman was killed by a large canid. And it's very sad. But here's an example of what happens when you don't pay attention to what all these reports lead up to. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
All right? Because you never want anyone to get hurt. And I think if people had been honest about what they'd been seeing more and people had been paying more attention, this incident never would have happened.
But then there's that stigma. If you talk about it, you're crazy.
There it is.
So, people don't want to talk about it, and that's why people like us are here.
Exactly. And again, it could have been, her death was ruled to, what was it, canine attack? What's the official? What was? Just give me 1 second, my friends.
I saw 3 on there.
Yeah. Yeah. Her whole basic manner of death was due to an accident and attack by a dog. Now, is it possible? Of course, it's possible. But with all those reports going on in that area, it's also possible something else is going to happen. So, again, you can't ignore the information in front of you, and sometimes when you do, bad things happen. I also think this would probably lead into maybe a David Paulides type situation, where I don't know what to think about him. I'll be honest with you. I'm a fan of his books. I own a couple of them. I've watched his movies, but there's part of me that thinks he's making a lot of money doing this now. Now that's fine. Again, I'm a capitalist. But is he making people aware of what they should be? Because it seems to me he keeps ditching the issue. What's the root cause?
Well,
I don't know.
I think anytime you do anything like this, and basically what you're saying is he actually reaching the people, and is that information helping those people?
Right.
The thing with what we do is it's a niche.
Mm-hmm.
And this information, even on the smallest format, is going to reach people, but it's only going to reach people that are interested in this stuff, not people that are out here going, oh, well, it's just the woods, da-da-da-da-da.
And again, we're not ragging on anyone. We're just saying that the information that's being made available, how is it being presented? Is it being presented in a format in which people are taking it seriously, or are they looking at it going, "Oh, this is hokum, ridiculous"?
I'll tell you this though, if there's ever a good example of why we tell people to be careful, it's David Paulides' books.
Mm-hmm. No, so in one way, he's actually woken up a lot of people. Again, I just think, I don't know. I'm suspect of his motives. He could be the greatest guy in the world. I just don't know.
Yeah.
I'd like to actually, the truth be told, I would love to actually see him in action. I'd like to talk to him.
Yeah.
See how he really is. But I think his books, I think if I had to judge it, I'd say they've probably been very helpful.
Yeah.
But, how are people dealing with this information? Are they looking at it like it's serious, or are they looking at it like it's a joke?
It's probably 6 of one, half a dozen of the other.
Exactly. And I tell you what, when he goes on coast to coast, I listen.
Yeah.
Because there's always something from North Carolina.
Yeah.
I keep listening. Years ago, all the crazy stuff used to happen in Florida. Now, for some reason, it seems like it's happening in North Carolina.
Because all the Florida people moving up here.
This is probably exactly what happened.
I mean,
You never know.
So, let me ask you a question. You remember, I guess it's probably been a year now since I've seen it floating around out there, but there was a video floating around there for a minute. It was viral as all get out. And it was of this really big wolf that just jumps up out of the woods. There's a smaller dog like trying to get to it, and it jumps up, runs its dog, and then just picks it up and goes with it. So, Dogman, Direwolf.
I'm in the Direwolf because I've seen that video a couple times, and the little dog gets away.
Does it?
Yeah, it does get away. That little dog, I think, was a lab. And it wasn't hurt. Apparently, the thing didn't attack it. It just kind of gave it a little what for.
Right. It's like, hey, shut up.
Yeah, I think that's what happened. Yeah. I don't know. Maybe it wasn't. It was something. It was barking a lot. I don't know if it was a puppy. I can't remember. But I know the other one got away because I saw the interview with the guy.
Yeah.
And I'm a firm believer that's a direwolf. But I don't think and again, being a cryptid guy, I don't think we ever lost direwolves. I think they probably had small bands in Upper Alaska in that area.
Well,
and
now,
they're just becoming
they just
more
came
successful.
Out not long ago and said that they're cloning direwolves. And the government, they actually said, I read an article on this, that they are working to recreate direwolves to help with deer and elk population.
That'll do it.
So,
for people that don't know what a direwolf is, if you've ever seen a movie or the TV show Game of Thrones, that big white dog that used to hang out with Jon Snow, that's a direwolf.
It's a wolf. It's about twice the size of what we got today.
Yeah, they're huge.
And there's another video floating around that I saw that it's off of a dash cam. And it's somewhere, it's not around here. I don't think it's even in the U.S. But these people are going down the road and they stop. And over the hill steps a wolf. I don't I really don't think it's a hoax. I think it's a real wolf. But the thing is massive.
I haven't seen that one. I'd love
I'll
to.
try
Send
and find it.
Yeah.
But it's massive, and it.
What we'll do is we'll try. My friends, for the people listening, we're going to try to put all these links in the bottom part of the video.
Yeah, I'll do my best to get them in there for you. But it's massive, and my thought, and it what it does is it walks out into the road and it's eyeballing the car like, what is this? And it walks like a wolf would. I've seen dogs keep that same mannerism when they're like,
it's always ready to pounce kind of thing.
It's like, what is this? It's kind of afraid, not exactly aggressive, somewhere in between, and it's massive. And then it just kind of walks off into the woods. I guess it figures it's
can't eat it.
Yeah.
Far.
But and that was my first thought is direwolf.
See, now I heard that they were also trying to bring back
Woolly mammoths.
Woolly mammoths and the woolly rhinoceros.
Yeah.
Because apparently, now I could be wrong here, but apparently woolly rhinoceroses were indigenous to the plains of America.
I don't know.
I don't know. I know woolly mammoths were on this continent.
Yeah. All right.
Who knows? You never know. But you know what? Maybe they've had these things for years, and a couple of them got loose.
Yeah. So have we hit our time mark yet?
I believe we have.
So I have one more question before
Yes, sir.
We'll end on this, and this is going to be hopefully a segue into yet another podcast.
Excellent.
So, you talked about your cryptid triangle, where you have Bigfoot on one axis, Dogman on one axis, and other on another axis. So, how many cryptids are here in North Carolina?
Oh, tiny. I wouldn't be arrogant enough to presume to know. There's
in your knowledge base,
I would probably say at least 20 or 30 different. But a lot of them go back to folklore, Native American mythology. It just depends on where you are. I mean, we've got the little people, we've got different versions of them. I mean, there's just so many. We've even had reports of, alligator man in this area. And I don't know how accurate that was.
Lake lure, and there's supposed to be a lake monster.
There's a lake monster. There's just all kinds of them. So you never know. I mean, ballpark 20 to 30.
So you leave Sasquatch Dogman out of it. What's your next favorite cryptid?
Personally, for me, I gotta go Mothman.
Mothman?
I love Mothman. He's awesome. Again, he's just a cool cryptid.
Yeah.
He's cool. I like puckwudgies.
I think I saw a puckwudgie once.
I believe that's what you saw too, after you described it to me when you were a little kid.
Yeah, it was. I wasn't a little kid. I was driving. I almost wrecked.
Yeah.
I saw it twice in the same spot.
Which one did you see when you were a little kid that looked like a gargoyle? Was that?
That was actually up in a tree.
Okay.
That was probably, I'd say that tree line, maybe it was a quarter mile away, and that tree was probably 100, 150 feet tall, and this thing was right on the top of it. And I wasn't the only one that saw it. My mom saw it too.
What's funny is after we talked about that, like a couple months after that, I was listening to a podcast, and a guy on the podcast talked about shooting and killing exactly what you described.
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of made me think, what is that? Because it sounded to me more like a gargoyle. But you never know. There could be puckwudgies with flight ability.
Well, and this thing was huge.
Yeah.
Whatever it was enormous.
Well, they've got bat squatch. Bat squatch theories in Texas. You never know. Again, that's what it's cryptids.
Big bats out there.
Well, yeah.
But at one point before, actually, I saw that we had something land on the roof, and we heard it walk across the roof. We heard the wings when it landed, when it took off, and we heard claws dragging across the roof.
Yeah, it's messed up.
So whatever it was big. The place I grew up in Tennessee, y'all, was, I can only describe it as a power place. I had cryptid experiences. I had supernatural experiences. I had paranormal experiences. I had UFO experiences. I mean, stories all day long. Just from there, it's part of what made me who I am today.
Well, again, people, just to clarify, under our cryptid paranormal umbrella, don't forget we include UFOs, aliens, all kinds of aliens, reptilians, reptoids, that whole gambit. I can't wait to do a podcast when we start talking about alien abduction and encounters. Little teaser here. the first reported abduction, Betty and Barney Hill. Barney Hill was my grandmother's mailman. So
Nice.
it's just a cool little connection. It means nothing, I mean, but it's just a cool little factoid. But and she spoke. I remember her telling me she thought he was the nicest, most honest guy, and it was a class act.
Yeah.
So we're going to talk about that, and we're going to talk about aliens. We got so much material. Again, for us, the paranormal realm, that's like what we call our X-Files. It's anything strange or out of the ordinary.
And you and I, we're an oddity
Oh, yeah.
in the paranormal world, because, you know, paranormal people and Bigfoot people are supposed to hate each other.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
And UFO and, you know, nobody in either genre is supposed to get along. And I don't understand why, because there's likely a connection between all of it.
See, I agree with that. And you know what's funny is our mutual buddy, Joshua P. Warren, you know, he's got some of the craziest...
Oh, and that's why we have an
there we go.
podcast, y'all.
He's got some of the craziest theories on cryptids and transdimensional, and I think they're ridiculous. But you know, he's a paranormal guy, and I respect him. So maybe there is something there. But I agree with Tiny. At some point in this convergence, when everything's known,
Yeah.
we're all going to find that everything's connected anyway. Because I'm a firm believer that everything on this planet is connected.
Yeah.
Every person, every creature, everything swimming in the ocean, we're all connected. And that's why I think we just need to take better care of each other and be nice. But that's a whole different story.
And there is no such thing as paranormal expert. We are all researching the same thing.
Exactly. I agree 100% with that. Now, on that line, if anyone would like to contact us, you can get us at beyondfringe001@gmail.com, or you can call us at 828-407-0046 at any time.
And that's with stories, encounters, questions. You know, you want us to do a certain topic on a podcast, anything.
If you want to be a guest on our show,
Yeah.
feel free to call. If you have any questions, again, feel free to call us or contact us via email. Thanks for joining us. We will see you later. Remember, keep believing.